Chad. We appreciate you guys coming on. We got some chassis schools we're going to talk about here in a little bit and some other things. But I want to, how's everything going with you, Chad?
Doing good. Yeah, we're had a really busy Monday today. We had our live event last Saturday, so the phone started ringing today, and we're working on our specials there. We got the free shipping on the Ultraforce machine orders this week, so it was pretty wild here today with that.
Yeah, I had a guy that I talked to about buying our machine, and I'm like, well, you need to buy it this week. And Bobby says, why are you in a big hurry to sell it? Well, because Chad's got free shipping. I mean, well, serious. Anyway, we got a special guest with us here tonight, Mr. Randy Lajoie. Randy owns a company, The Joy of Seating, and Randy's been an extreme advocate for safety for a very, very long time. A lot of it has to do with his experience of being an actual race car driver, plus the fact of just being out and about and watching some of the things that are going to happen. And so Randy's going to kind of talk to us a lot about things tonight with safety. So that's going to be our lead comment and our lead discussion. Those of you guys that want to ask any chassis questions or any questions for Chad, feel free to still chime in and answer those or ask those questions, because we'll be here to do that. But with all the races, and especially with the big race coming up in Bristol and all the people that are going to Bristol, I thought tonight would be an excellent night to have Mr. Lajoie on there. So Randy, tell us what all you do.
Well, thanks a lot, Bob and Chad. You guys are great for the industry. One of the things that I like to talk about, with the guys in the off season, is we've seen some big wrecks this year. It started at Daytona with Ryan Newman and my boy Corey. If it wasn't for Dale Earnhardt passing, we would have went to 2 more funerals. But by him passing and NASCAR paying attention, those boys are alive today because of that. And then later in the year, we seen the Formula One wreck. That was the most violent thing I've ever seen. And to see that guy jump over the wall, not get knocked out, it just goes to show that it's not just one thing. It's the systems in the cars. Like you always hear the chassis guy says, well, it's not always a chassis. It's the shocks, it's the springs, it's everything. And that's the same thing in safety. It is the systems. If Corey's system didn't work well, and his car, Daytona, I mean, his body moved 6 inches forward. It was a 45G hit. His body went forward. The cage came down. If they didn't have that Newman bar, Newman would have been in his lap. Corey, where he hit Newman, I think the seat that Ryan had in his car was an aluminum seat. It saved his life. I think that from going there and looking at both cars at the NASCAR R&D Center, 2 months later, it was just amazing to see the impact and how much stuff moves. And that's why I've always been a proponent for strong seats, because if my life was worth anything, why wouldn't these guys on Thursday, Friday, Saturday nights be worth anything? A good rated seat is good. Short seat belts are really good. Head and neck restraints. It's the systems in the cars. I try to tell guys, I did a promoters meeting beginning of the year. And I said, guys, when these guys sign into your pit and you take their money, the racers are almost playing Russian roulette. And I was like, we have loaded. It's always going to be dangerous. But if you have a good head and neck restraint, you got good mounted seat belts, you got a good containment seat, all that stuff, you take bullets out of the chamber. I wouldn't mind playing Russian roulette with no bullets. I'm not quite sure if there's one in there I would play. But that's part of the reason racers do it, because, that's the thrill of it. We want to do this because there is danger involved, and, we all think we're gladiators.
Well, that's the problem. We all think, well, that ain't going to happen to me. I mean, it'll be okay. I mean, when have you ever seen that happen? Well, all it takes is one time, and I can remember, keep in mind, this is dating back a few years ago, and this was long before Dale Sr. situation, but back in 1980, I had a pretty rough or pretty bad wreck in Fairmont, Minnesota. And I had a fiberglass seat in the car. And the fiberglass seat broke, and the actual seat cut through my suit and cut all the way up and down my ribs in that crash. So no problem. I lived through that, kind of had a neck injury and some stuff. So then the next year I get smart. I'm going to buy an aluminum seat. So I bought this aluminum seat. Well, then I get hit or whatever, and all of a sudden I'm sitting in here and I can kind of move around. So I'm sitting here pulling this seat tight, and I'm thinking to myself, well, that's kind of stupid. The seat was supposed to protect me. So, man, needless to say, we went back home and we mounted things a little bit different. And, you know, and of course it's nothing like what they have today, but I can remember what it felt like, what my ribs felt like today. And that was in 1980. So these guys got to pay attention to the fact that, you know, you just never know when some freak thing's going to happen.
I see Pat Fagan, just like that.
Oh yeah, Pat's a loyal watcher. He's been on the show before.
I would hate to think. He's one of the guys in the industry. I mean, you meet all kinds, and that's wonderful. I mean, this is a wonderful industry, and Pat is one of the greatest guys. If the world had more Pats in it, it would be a better place.
Yep. Yeah, no doubt about that. We give him a pretty bad time because we don't want to give him a lot of compliments. We could kind of get a little big head, but we don't want that to happen, right, Pat? But no, I always appreciate Pat watches, and like I said, he's been on the show before. But talk about mounting the seat and some of that type of stuff. What type of things should these guys be looking at?
You know, the stronger the seats are getting, you have to mount them different. Remember the old Pontiac commercials? Wider is better. They advertise their wide track. Well, that's what you have to do with a containment seat. You know, the higher and the wider. If you support it across your shoulders, that's where your load is. So your seats that used to be mounted, you know, middle of your chest, lower shoulder blades, guys, that's not the proper way. You have to, because you don't want the seat to flex. At the end of the day, your next weakest point is going to flex. So you put a strong seat in the car, you don't mount it correctly, you're still going to have issues. And that's one of the things working with NASCAR on that new ABTS, which is all belts to seat, that all the touring series have to have for the last 3-4 years now. That we mounted it in the fixture and we did our testing. Well, the mounts were failing. Same mounts are in the rule book, but the mounts failed because of the load that was put now on the mount that we translated through the belts. So NASCAR had to rewrite the rules, and it made a lot of sense to me. Like, okay, we can't do this to short track racing yet until we get to go to the car builders and say, here, guys, we have to build a fixture, a standard mount, something that's strong, something that's attached to the cage that won't let these seats move. And that's one of my biggest things I've seen fighting against the industry or butting heads with chassis builders is they're not giving the guys enough room in the cars. That's one thing NASCAR did. First thing they did after they lost 5 or 6 drivers, they made the all around the driver bigger. That's it. We have to protect that driver, so we have to make it bigger in order to put a big seat in the car, a big headrest in the car. And to do all that, you need room. And to see guys that can't get in and out of cars, you know, that's just wrong. I mean, I wish they had 2 exits. I've always said when guys go to the scale at any racetrack, dirt, asphalt, when they pull into the scale after a heat race, they're usually in pretty good frame of mind, you know, because they're in good shape. They made the A main. Tell them to get out of the car. Shut it off. Climb out of the car. Not out the window net. Try somewhere else. And it would open up guys' eyes to say, okay, maybe I should give myself a little more room in here because we got to have 2 exits out of these cars. You just can't hold these guys in. We can contain them. All the seat companies have enough containment around, but you got to get them in and out. I mean, that's something that I wish they could just go to all big board cages. there's a lot of guys that aren't jockey size. There's some regular big guys that like doing this stuff. So they shouldn't have to skimp on safety equipment because they can't fit. And that's something that, I got to keep trying to push.
Well, that was one thing, compliment GRT 3 years ago. They made their cage wider. They made it a little bit longer. They put more uprights in it and made some more safety features. And that basically come from Jordan Grabowski, because Jordan, bless his heart, he's not a jockey. He's a full-size dude, and he recognized the fact that if he was in an accident, he couldn't get in and out of those cars, because the older style cars with everything more confined, I don't think I could. I only weigh 200 pounds, but I don't think I could have got in and out of there. So and that's the thing that you see in like this year or the last couple of years. A lot of chassis builders now have started to put that extra bar by the head, so that if you do get something that comes in that window. So the chassis guys, I really got to compliment them. They've done a great job responding to the safety. We just need to not quit yet. We need to keep going on this safety stuff.
Oh, it's a continuing moving target. You're just kicking the can down the road, because usually when somebody gets hurt, nobody's ever seen that happen before. Yeah. Well, okay, let's make it not happen again. If it happened once, it can happen again. And that's what NASCAR finally did after Kenny Irwin, Tony Roper, Adam Petty, Blaze Alexander. Same injuries. Dale Earnhardt. Okay, after Dale, he said, hey, guys, you're going to wear a head and neck restraint. If you can go on the racetrack, you're going to have a head and neck restraint on. And that was 2002. Well, here it is 2021, and I'm sure if I go to Florida and go down to Speed Weeks, there's going to be 20% of the cars at a racetrack that have a 1975 seat in the car that's uncontained. Come on. I wouldn't even take the guys $40. I'll send them home. Say, no, I don't need your $40 that bad. The industry doesn't need your $40 that bad, because the industry sure doesn't need to have front page of a paper somebody getting hurt.
Right.
We don't need that. Or get killed. We don't. The industry doesn't need that. There's enough stuff going on that the information for safety, NASCAR has done such a good job. But there again, I haven't tripped over many people out there at the short tracks, helping these guys. I've been 170 tracks, and I'm going to keep going, because I number one, I like racing. I'm a hell of a fan, but there should be no secrets in safety. Everybody had speed secrets. Everybody had Chad's stuff over here. I can tell you that I got Chad's stuff over here, because you'll be the same as me then. I'm not going to go see Bob about his shocks, because I'm not going to tell you what he told me, because that's a speed secret. There should be none of that stuff in safety. It's an open book. Guys, this is what I learned. I'm telling you guys, don't move, run short belts, have a head and neck restraint. The system and the safety stuff, no secrets, open book, and guys should be able to go home to their families, to their kids, husbands, wives. The danger is always going to be there. It's going to be there no matter what. But there's a lot of things in place today that can make our trip home a whole lot better.
Yeah, and it's sad we had to lose Dale Earnhardt to be able to get that ball rolling. But like we said, the ball still has to roll, because it really hasn't hit everybody yet. It's hit a lot of people, because I see a lot of guys that have some pretty good stuff. But that stuff is just so important. Now, for the guy that's listening, explain what you mean by short seat belts.
Well, stretch. Years ago, there were the nylon belts. Well, nylon belts had 40% stretch in it. Well, today's belts are all a whole lot better than the nylon belts, but there's still a 10, 12% stretch. So your body in a 35-mile-an-hour impact, you hit something 35 mile an hour straight ahead, your body's going to come out of the seat forward 3 to 4 inches. Just because our bodies are 60% fluid, your belts are going to stretch. So there's always going to be movement. were containing Jello. Some guys have less Jello than other guys. So you always go with a shorter belt. I mean, years ago, I remember my dad was a racer, and he took a seat belt and he had it bolted and he hung a 50-pound lead off of it. And I couldn't believe how much is stretched with that 50-pound lead. He's like, okay, we got to keep these things short. Okay, so we did. And I've seen cars that the seat belts are 2 foot from the guy's body. Well, that's probably not the optimum for the seat belt. And I wish people would just pay attention to the manufacturer's suggestions and where to mount them. I mean, it's even the car builders. These car builders have been building cars. They build beautiful race cars. Well, why don't you put the seatbelt tab instead of where you want it or where your welder put it 20 years ago to where the manufacturer of the seatbelt wants you to put it? You're going to weld it on the car, move it ahead 3 inches, 4 inches, put the angle correct. So that's something that, okay, guys, just really have to pay attention, because you don't need any of that stuff until you need it. And then when you need it, golly, you wish you had the best.
Yeah, no doubt about that. Steve Knight checked or commented on it, said hello to you, Randy, and reminded me, and I forgot this, I had this all wrote down, that for those who might not know, just everybody knows you from your seat part of it, but we need to know a little bit about Randy Lajoie himself, the 1996 and 97 Busch Grand National champion. And he says he was happy to attend a few of your victory parties at the Sandwich Construction Company in Charlotte, North Carolina.
And that's I wasn't the only one to go to Sandwich Construction. That was the mainstay of NASCAR for lunch and a victory party. If when your team won, that was a cool place to go. I think there's been a few marriages come out of that place, and I think they're still together, some of them.
Well, that's good.
Yeah.
Austin wants to remind us about the quick rescue roofs. It's got pretty popular in the North Dakota area, and we've used quite a few of those quick rescue roofs. And the quick rescue roof came because of a situation where Robbie Conway had a heart attack. And the problem was they couldn't get him out of the car. If they could have got him out of the car and got him to help, he could have possibly lived. But it ended up, by the time they got him out of the car and everything and got him to the hospital, it was just really too late. He lived for a little while, but he didn't live very long. So his brother wanted to create a solution to help people to get out of the car. And so he's come up with the quick rescue roof. And the quick rescue roof is really slick. I mean, it's just it slides through the opening there, so the safety workers can unclip this roof and pull somebody straight out rather than trying to get them out or cutting the cage apart or whatever they've got to do. So it's definitely, there's been a lot of things that have come into play.
Here's a roof hatch story.
Yep.
I was at Peevely, went up there years ago, happened to go up to the racetrack, watching a race. Kenny Wallace was racing. He was sitting in the grandstand. A guy had a flat tire, and he was down on the inside of the backstretch with the left side of the car up against the wall. And he was stuck. Well, he couldn't get out of the car. And so Kenny was up there, and, I said, Kenny, look at that guy trying to get out of that car. And it was kind of comical, from watching the guy trying to get out of the car. And I said, what happens if he was on fire? And Kenny's like, I don't know if I can get out. So we went down to his car. He climbed in it, and he couldn't get out. So the next time I seen him was Volusia, and he said, Randy, come check out my car. And he had a roof hatch on it.
Yep.
I said, great idea. Well, what did he do? He flipped over. He couldn't get out of the car. So that's why we still need other places. Because that okay, who would have thought he's going to end up on his lid? But that's what happens.
Yep, no doubt. I mean, everybody's protecting that aero advantage but I'll guarantee you, if the fire was to start, they could care less about how much aerodynamics that thing's got, because they
Right.
want to figure out how they're going to get their butt out of that car.
I had drove a car, Bob, in North Dakota. A guy brought me out there. I was David Murray's teammate.
Okay,
And
sure.
did that, whatever, that Rough Rider tour, maybe,
Yep.
out there in Kansas. And one of the things I learned on one of those modifieds, your door tops, right there where the window net is,
Mm-hmm.
the door tops, if they're bigger than an inch, it's hard to get in and out of that car.
Oh yeah.
By narrowing that door top up, a lot of guys, they think they must be running Talladega or Daytona because they want to make it look cool and close in the cockpits. But anytime you add material to your door top, you can't get in. I mean, your bodies just don't flex. We need another Weir's Machine product in our hip to get us in and out of the car.
Well, and the thing about that, when you watch some of those guys even try to get in their cars, you're like, dude. I mean, it's ridiculous. But once again, I got to be careful. Speaking about safety on building cars, I think all cars should be underslung. John, there's a lot to that. I think there's more to the construction side of it than just being underslung, but I would agree with you. The cars definitely are stronger. They take on a little bit more load. John, who's commenting on here, went off turn 3 at Boone and flipped end over end off the backside of that, or off the end of that racetrack. And needless to say, his race car didn't hold up super well, and he's just unbelievably lucky that he didn't get hurt. I know.
I think that was my last year there.
Yep. I know he was stiff and sore, but he didn't get hurt. But when you look at the race car, the good Lord was definitely looking over him on that deal. There's no doubt about that.
And that's proven that the good Lord's a race fan, because this stuff's always going to be dangerous.
Jeez. Okay. Outlaw Angler 8M Sport Mod. When mounting the right rear spring, how far from the rotor should I mount the spring?
So it don't spark.
Yeah. On the average, we're usually in that 10 to 12 inch range. Kind of depends. I'm not a firm believer in what I'm talking about is from the outside of the rotor to where the actual spring, the center of the spring is 12 inches. If you get it too far out, what happens is it makes the car too finicky. You have to run a softer spring to get it to roll. Well, then the problem is with the softer spring, it doesn't want to roll back as quick. So, if you can run that stuff a little bit more inboard, it's just a better pivotable thing so that you can still run a relatively stiff spring and still have good control. He also says, Chad, I have your 2-link mounts that have the extra mounts in front of the cage. When mounting them there, do I run the same angle or less? What does it do to the car?
So the row of holes that's farther forward and closer to center line, that allows you to get the motion going quicker so you can run less angle. If you have the bar underneath the center line, you have to run more angle to get the motion. So in the 2-link cars, some of the cars, like the Shaw is one that started it, they moved the bar forward in the car and moved it up. So when you're up and forward close to the center line of the axle, it gets the motion, the roll steer going quicker. So theoretically, you can run a little bit less angle there to get the motion. And then you're not so pogo stick straight up and down with that lower link when you're at, max height. And then the car gets rigid when that bar is basically straight up and down. So it's kind of a little bit like the zero index thing where you take the bind out of the suspension, moving that bar forward. But you have to have the car built in order to keep the length the same to meet the rules. So if you have the capability to run that arm forward and up like that, it's been a pretty good package.
That's kind of a standard Shaw type package, isn't it?
Yeah, Shaw, I think they do that on every car in the left rear.
Okay. Yeah. I was thinking that was the case. Levi agrees with the cockpits need to be bigger to accept the better seats. Once again, like I said, it's just one of the things that the chassis builders we went down a road because everybody wanted all that stuff. And it looks like we might have lost Randy.
Not his that.
Oh, anyway, they kind of went down that road because that's kind of what everybody was requiring, because they wanted all this aerodynamics part of it. And now that the safety features have come into play, the cockpits are definitely getting bigger. And so there's a lot of work going on. And like I said, I can't compliment these chassis guys enough. I mean, most of these chassis guys are drivers or have been drivers. So, I mean, they understand. I mean, it's just like Justin from Rage Chassis. He's not necessarily a 110-pound kid. I mean, he's a pretty good-sized boy, and he races one of those cars. So, I mean, he's got a lot of respect for the safety factor because, he's got a wife and 2 kids too. So he's going to build, and as a chassis builder, you sure do not want to see any of your customers ever get hurt. I mean, that's just the worst thing that can happen, and you feel bad. So you're hoping that doesn't happen. So anyway,
that tub style interior tin. I think asphalt cars, you can't even build a tub style so that you can get out the right side of the car.
Right.
The dirt cars would just, change the way they build them tunnels a little bit so guys could get out the right side of the car. I think would be huge for trying to have a secondary or third. If you got the roof hatch, not only getting out the left, but being able to get out the right side is critical, I think. But cars can't have that. But
back in the day, we always built, like, we come from our dash and would go down by the tunnel, would go down and then back up so that there was an easier way for the drivers to get out, and then angle it towards there. But they used to, and I still think they have, specific measurements that, from that top roll bar to that interior still has to be, I think it's 12 inches. But I'm not sure that how many people could get in and out of the 12-inch area. The car that we had at the Super Nationals, we had built that car so that it was a real small cockpit. But the kid's 105 pounds. And he's, I don't know, 5'2" maybe. He's not very big. And so, I mean, he could crawl any place in that car and be fine. But if he resells it, there's not too many people that could drive that car. Dustin was late getting on. Maybe you already discussed this, but for the life of me, can't figure it out. How do I set the bearing spacers? I spent 5 hours last night and can't get it. Well, what we actually do for our bearing spacers is, it does, it can be a very timely situation, but we just basically, it's trial and error. Just get that thing, so that it does not have any movement in that rotor, and put the very thin amount of grease on there, and just set it so that you have the rotor turns freely, but it has no, you cannot move the rotor at all. And I always recommend too that, once again, like with these bearing spacers, after you've got a couple, 3 nights on them, I think you need to take them back out and kind of reset that stuff, because every part that's on your car, when it's brand new, there's going to be a little bit of an initial wear pattern where things are going to settle into place a little bit and stuff like that. And you sure don't want those rotors to be slopping back and forth. Yeah, and Steve actually chimed in here. Remember back to the old days of the 4th and 5th design Howe interior. Those cars, I think you could take 2 or 3 people with you. The way the interiors were built in those cars. So that was a pretty good deal. Stock cars just got on, so sorry if I missed this. Transmission rule change. What would be everyone's opinion of changing from the LW 3-speed to a Burt or a Brin? Well, I know my opinion, it would be a no-brainer, because I don't know much about the Burt transmission. I'm fairly aware of the Brin stuff, and they're pretty bulletproof. I mean, it just, if something goes wrong with that transmission, you did it. I mean, it's not something that they don't fail a whole lot. Jerry, with the flex plate racing conditions put on a car, is there a recommendation? On the time frame of either race or seasons that a seat would need to be replaced or sent to the manufacturer for inspection? Oh, got it. With the flex of a race car. Got it. Sorry, I added an extra word in there. That's yours, Randy.
Well, what I've done, being that my stamping, my seat is not a seat that I make into a box, and that it's a stamped piece of aluminum, it becomes very strong. And then with the tubing I put on it, I checked a seat about a month ago. I put it on my fixture and I got an old seat back and wanted to refurb it. And before I refurbed it, I put it on my testing rig and I tested it. And it was stronger 10 years later than it was before I sent it out, because of the material age hardens, the material, after it gets stamped, it just keeps getting harder and harder and harder. With the tubing, there's not a lot of places that can crack. So I guarantee all my seats against cracking or breaking. If it's mounted correctly, you're not going to have issues. So that's one of the things. Other seats that are square and that have a break in them, I mean, they call it a break for a reason, because you're putting a shear point in that. And when they do flex, they're going to crack. So a lot of seats, the newer rated seats, the industry has gotten a lot better and building better seats. So I say if your seat's any within 5 years old, you should check for cracks. And if you have an impact, a lot of seats bend on impact. When you bring them back, they're going to crack. So if you've had to adjust your seat, 9 times out of 10, there's possibilities that they can definitely crack. I refurbish a lot of mine. A lot of guys will send their seats into me and say, hey, can you update this to a 39.2 spec? And I said, yes, I can. So, I mean, just because the outside shell may not be as strong as a rated seat, your shell, I'm not changing that. I'm just adding strength to the outside. So I can refurb any seats that are out there into a better quality. A lot of seats, when I started building, when I came into, were all rated seats up until about 2009. My seats were better than the industry even had. They didn't have a rating, and I built all rated seats because at the end of the day, I was a crash test dummy, and I felt better when I moved less. And that's just the way it is. I still feel a bunch of my impacts that I had, being a racer in, 96 and 97 in the South and 1985 in the North. I mean, I grew up, my dad was a racer. I grew up around, my dad raced against Richie Evans and Bugsy Stevens and Ronnie Bouchard and Maynard Troyer. I mean, I grew up one great race fan watching wonderful race car drivers. Then, my dad came from Danbury, Connecticut, and it was an amazing place. It was I read all the magazines. I have all the magazines in my office, and I'll take one and go into the bathroom with it. And an average night was 8,000 people. My dad would win a race, and they made 40% of the gate. So he would come home from a 25-lap feature with $3,000 in his pocket. They had, 3 extra distance events. He would make $8,000-$10,000. And they're at 12,000, 15,000 people. And I thought every place was like that, but no, they're not. So just a hell of a race fan. Grew up watching a lot of guys. And I got to win a few of them, so that was fun.
So if I bought a seat from you 5 years ago when you were at the Boone Super Nationals, how would I go about getting a hold of you or contacting you, sending the seat back in just so you could inspect it and make sure that it's up to what you want it to be? And what does that cost?
Well, we can do. I mean, the refurbs. I'll take a Diamond Series seat that was not a. That's my economy seat, $1,500 seat, and my rated seats are $2,395. So I'll take that Diamond Series seat, and I'll refurbish it. You're going to get it. It's going to be powder coated. It's a brand new seat when you get it back, and that's usually $750. For a seat that just you might have had it for 10 years, and with a refurb on it, you'll have it for another 10 years.
So for $750, you basically get a brand new seat back.
Absolutely.
And what kind of turnaround or something like that usually?
We are a little busy, thank God, right now. Not as busy as we've been in the past, but right now we're 6 weeks out.
So if somebody was to do that, they would want to get on it.
Sooner the better. I mean, racers always tend to wait for the last minute, and then when they don't receive it, they're mad at you. He's like, well, I seen you in August, and you didn't place an order until January. Come on, help me out. I could have had it. If you had it placed the order in August, heck, you would have had it in September.
Well, man, I don't know what kind of customers you get. Chad and I never have any of them guys. No. Come middle of March, we won't have 5 packages of 10 shocks per package. And oh, by the way, we're going racing next weekend.
Yeah.
And needless to say, the guy that does the shocks, humor is not his strong point on those type of things. So, but he usually gets them done for him. He will growl and complain and ask the question why they didn't send them in sooner. And it's like, it's this way every year, bud. Just
absolutely
the way it goes. They do not need their shock absorbers to build the race car, so no reason to spend any money there. It's kind of how that goes. Joel's got a question. Right front spring cup on an A-mod. I run a 2.5-inch drop cup with the 285D, but I cannot run the 2.5-inch drop cup with the OD cup, having clearance issues, but don't have the clearance issues with the standard cup. I would think that it would be better option if you could only run one or the other. My opinion, I would clearance the frame. We've had that situation in here. We've had a couple cars in here that we just, and what we're actually doing now on all the new stuff, we're actually taking and putting a little bit more clearance, because what happens is, that where that spring cup is, it kind of is sort of like a U-shaped, and the frame comes out like that. So we've actually had to kind of come up here a little bit more and make that more of a squared off corner. Doesn't hurt the strength of that stub. It just gives you more clearance in the spring pocket. And that's one thing about, and for those of you who might not be members of the Race Tech Knowledge Center, Bobby did a great video on that. In fact, actually, I think that was on Facebook. Did a great video on that about relocating that spring and making sure that spring is all in the center so that it works together. That's a huge deal. And when you look at most of these cars, especially the right front, when these cars, a lot of times when some of these cars were designed, we weren't moving all this much on the right front. We were getting movement, but we weren't laying that thing over, up against the A-frame on the frame. And now we're getting a lot more travel over there, and so these springs are not necessarily aligned correctly for that much travel. And we've got a jig fixture that we just clamp a spring to a lower control arm. We bolt it on there, cut your bracket out, and relocate that rod so that when that spring goes through its travel, it's 100% equal all the way. There's not any pivoting whatsoever. And that new drop cup with the outside diameter is definitely going to need a little bit more clearance, and now's the time. And you don't have to clearance it a whole lot. They're not very far off, but I would definitely run the outside grab with the bearing and the drop cup, and I'd make it work in my chassis, is what I would do. because
Did you see that Saturday?
the advantage is so huge. I can't stress enough how that OD Cup with that bearing is daylight and dark from anything that we have run so far.
Did you watch that Saturday when we had 600 pounds of load on that spring and we couldn't turn it?
Yep.
And then we put the bearings in there and I just turned it really
Yeah,
good.
yeah. Put the bearings in. You're two-handing that thing to try to turn it, and then you put the bearing in it, and you kind of like, oh, well, I could almost spin this thing.
Yeah. Yeah, it's huge for sure.
But daylight and dark. I mean, with the load machine, I could not believe when we first got that prototype one, we put that in there and we did all the load tests and everything before. We put that load in there and it was unbelievable how free it made everything and how the load stick, everything was just so much freer in that right front corner. Well, it's kind of a no-brainer. That's sort of what we want, is everything to be free. I mean, that you don't have to think real hard about this deal.
Right.
I'd get out my torch and my grinder and I'd make that thing fit. One thing I do want to mention, we do have our chassis schools coming up. We've got our sport mod coming up here in a couple of weeks, the 15th and 16th of January. IMCA TV is going to be broadcasting that. So for those of you who can't make the trip out here, or you're stuck out in California or whatever, it's going to be available on IMCA TV. And so that way we're kind of making it available for everybody due to the COVID restrictions. And for the in-class deal, we're gonna have some restrictions. We're going to be taking temperatures. I'm going to probably require that you wear a mask anytime if you're not sitting in your seat. And we just need to, the guys that come here need to understand we need to protect each other, and nobody needs to get sick, and we can get through it. The school will be as good of a school as it ever has been. We're going to have a little bit lower number because, of course, we can get about 75 people in here, but it's elbow to elbow. And so we're probably going to limit it to 45 to 50 people in the school itself. So we just want to make sure you know that that's going to be there. Those of you, and we're also doing right now for the Knowledge Center guys, we're doing a bump steer video. We're using the new Weir's bump steer machine, or not machine, what would I call that, Chad?
The bump stick?
Yeah, the bump steer stick, which is basically like the
load stick.
The load stick, only doesn't have the cell on it. It's just a ratcheting thing. So instead of trying to use a bottle jack up underneath that lower control arm that you can't find a flat spot on, and then you raise it and it moves, this will put right in here. And like the car we've got, you can't see it, but the car that's behind us here, we've done the right front and we're going to do the left front tomorrow. But we've got set, what we did was set everything at ride height, and then we put the stationary load sticks in there and then put it up in the air so we know where our center to center measurement's going to be. And then we set up all the bump steer stuff. And we've actually made a bump steer gauge that goes right on our scale stands so that you don't have to be bending over and everything. It's pretty slick. So that video will be coming out here in probably another week. Derek's got a question. New to the stock car this season, what date and what will you be covering in the chassis school for the stock cars? Thanks for the videos. The stock car school is going to be February 26th and 27th. Mr. Kelly Sharak will be here. He'll be one of our guest speakers. Kelly was the winner of the Super Nationals Race of Champions race in the stock cars this year. Kelly won a lot of races up in Britt and Algona, where he ran locally with his stock car. And so he's going to be a great speaker. He's also going to be one of our speakers for the 4-link. I've known Kelly since he was probably 3 years old, and we clicked pretty well together, and I enjoyed doing schools with him. He's very knowledgeable, and his record proves that he's very knowledgeable. So that'll be the dates. Paul Berger from B&B Chassis, he will also be here. I'm not sure. We're working on a couple other guys, but we just haven't really got there yet. with the 3 inches of deck slope allowed after the seat on a sport mod, couldn't a guy keep the deck perfectly level until the last 3 to 4 inches of the deck, then put the IMCA won't allow you to do that. What they want is they'll measure right behind the seat, and they'll measure at the back, and it needs to go 3 inches level. Now, if you go back further, your measurement's going to change, because what they're going to do is they're going to put a string line or something on there, and it's got to measure that way out. You can't build a spoiler into the deck. That will not be illegal, or that will be illegal. Let's see. Randy makes one of the nicest seats on the market. On the Weir's modular 2-link third cage, can a guy just weld the nuts on the adjustable shock mount to be legal for Northern Modified? Adjustable shock mount rule, or do we have to buy the plates to replace the shock mounts? No, you can weld that stuff together. They're fine with that. As long as it shows that you can't physically move that thing, that's kind of their big thing. They don't want people to be adjusting that. Not going to give you an opinion on that rule. It's just kind of one of those deals that it's a rule, and we play by it. Steve also says Randy's a racer came from a salvage yard business and worked his tail off. He understands the
metallurgy.
Okay, yeah, we'll go with that. And can TIG weld and fabricate and build. Yeah, I was actually at Randy's shop. Gosh, this would have probably been 4 years ago, because we were down there. This is when Corey and Moffat were in the Nationwide, or not Nationwide series, the K&N series.
Hell, longer than that. That was 2012.
Oh, I don't know. That's been a long time ago. Keep in mind, my memory's not so good. But anyway, I was down there then, and yeah, Randy's got a heck of a fabrication shop there. It's pretty awesome. Jim, what's your recommendations for seat mounting bolts? Would you use grade 5 or grade 8?
Well, we use a lot of when I supply the seat, I have a machine bung that hides a bolt. So a bolt's not sticking you in the back. So I use a lot of the grade 8 Allen bolts because they fit inside. The hex fit inside, but they're kind of a pain to hold. But the stronger bolt, the better. I mean, if they're mounted correctly, I haven't seen many bolts break. Knock on wood yet. So, I've seen seats pop riveted in. Bolts are good. They're a lot better than pop rivets. And, some guys, the one guy that did pop rivet the seat in, I said, "What are you doing? Come on." And he goes, "Well, it's a steel rivet." Well, okay, that's just a typical racer. He put the steel. He had a choice. He could have put aluminum rivet or steel. He put the steel.
He could have put aluminum ones in there. Yep. Chad, also, what grade bolt for a J-bar?
We use grade 5 bolts on the J-bars.
Yeah, I would recommend that, because with that being a shear factor, that could be, yeah. Pat's got a question. Pull bar, lift arm, pros and cons if you have any time. Well, Pat, you should know in our IMCA rules, we have one option, and it's a pull bar. In the USM,
that's the top bar.
What?
The pull bar is the top bar.
Yes.
Now, I mean, back when I was a Northeast Modified guy, Troyer was the first one to come up with the lift arm alongside the rear, and I'm not sure I could tell a difference, but the new thing I had to put on the car because it was a new thing.
From my experiences, depends, of course, a lot on the tire, and of course, it depends on the actual rules. But if I was running someplace that had momentum, the lift bar is going to make the car drive better. What the lift bar tries to do is try to lift the front end. and transfer the weight to the back. The pull bar lifts the weight that's already on the back of the car and tries to put it down to the rear end. Well, with an IMCA car, you've got to run a pull bar because that's the rule. USMTS, you can run a lift arm. There for a while, the lift arm thing is kind of come and gone. It's kind of a, but those guys, last year at the end of the year, there was quite a few guys running that lift bar and USMTS stuff. And see, they've got a big enough spoiler, good enough tire. The lift bar would probably, the lift bar car is an easier, more controllable car to drive. Next question is, do you have a bearing for the 5-inch OD?
5.5. 5.5.
Or 5.5, I meant.
We're working on it. We're getting them made right now, so hopefully we'll have them here in a couple weeks. Would Sport Mod cover the 3-link Wasota B Mod? Yes. That school, the Sport Mod school, we cover USRA B Mod, Wasota B Mod, and the IMCA Sport Mod, or anything that has a 3-link rear suspension. And when we're talking 3-link, we're counting that solid upper link as the 3rd link. Austin, was that a new drop cup OD cup that Chad held up? Yes, that is. Yeah, buddy.
That is. We should actually have them at BHE tomorrow, I think, or the next day.
What is that, a spring bucket?
Yeah. Yeah, so it grabs the OD instead of the ID. So it keeps the spring more lined up, and then we put a Torrington bearing on the inside here, so when the spring is going through its travel and twisting, it just makes the spring act better and happier through travel.
More control.
Yes.
And that's a drop bearing, so that lowers the spring table, which gets the car on the right front easier.
I'm glad I'm on the sideline. There's too much trick stuff going on here.
Well, that's part of the innovation thing, man.
Never stops.
Never stops.
The drop cup goes in the right front, second half of his question there. Drop cup right front, standard cup left front to help induce roll on the right front.
And you do have an extended cup for the left front for guys that aren't chaining the left front down. Is that correct? It's a 2-inch cup?
Yeah, 1 inch and 2 inch. So the short cup has a 1-inch lip, just like the drop cup, like this one. And then the tall cup will have a 2-inch inner lip there if you're not running chain on the left front.
And then you also make one for the IMCA Sport Mod that has the right rear spring on top of the housing. Is that correct?
Correct. You want to see that? I got that too.
Yeah, go ahead and get that stuff for us, Chad.
I'm glad he was prepared, Bob.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, you don't never know what questions. He's lucky he's in the warehouse. I have to go across the street.
He's actually in his showroom because this is where they did the live on Saturday, and you need to think about that. That what he did on it live. You go on to Weir's Facebook.
Yeah, that's a great idea. That was incredible.
I tell you what, it doesn't take a whole lot of time, and just showing people, take your seat and do like you're doing at a trade show and showing everybody the pieces of the seat and stuff. I think that's a huge idea.
Yeah, so this is the Sport Mod version where the screw jack goes in. Those will be back Thursday, I think, from the plater. So.
Yeah, I found out today we don't have any of them on order, so I'm pretty sure you'll be getting an order tomorrow about that.
Cool.
Do you put, let's see here. Oh yeah, Dustin says, you guys are amazing. The information is great. The product Chad is making amazing. Just wanted to say thank you guys. Well, we appreciate it. We enjoy doing this deal. We have a lot of fun. Our next show is going to be January 18th, and we got Mr. David Ruderman going to be on for that show.
The Beak.
Yeah, the Beak. David is a Beak built chassis builder, former NASCAR driver. He's had some of the experiences of Randy, getting things wrong a couple times or so, whatever.
He was also he's also one of my data acquisition technologists. through the seat company because David did hit some stuff.
Yep. Well, we're looking forward to having him on there. Do you put spring preload in the left rear as part of the scaling process or after you have scaled it? Stock car spring separation from the shock. With a stock car or a sport mod, anything that's a 3-link car, I would put the spring load in the car and scale it with that load in the car. Will sport mods be able to run the short shaft left front shock now that the rule has changed? No, they will not be able to. Well, they can. It doesn't matter what length shock shaft you have. They're going to want to be able to go over to the front bumper and they want to be able to pull that car up. So if they can lift that car just a little bit, that's going to help. That's what Dave explained to us about the rule is they just don't want any preload on it. So if you're running the short shaft left front shock and it's preloaded, you won't have to change the shock, but you're probably going to need to put a shock extension on it or something to that effect so that it doesn't, you don't have a problem going through tech with that. Because that's what they're going to do is they want to be able to pick up on the front bumper and make sure that the car will come up. It just has to come up. Chadwick, can we get closer look at the upper arms behind you and how much are the ball joint replacements for those? Oh, dude, it's been years since Bob's been a salesman, so I don't know if I can actually give you any prices. You might have to give us a call tomorrow here at the shop. But these are our new ball joint, our new A-frames. Close Racing Supply are the ones that actually make these for us. They're a welded clevis. Are we able to see this on? Okay. They're a welded clevis, and then this part of the A-frame is actually welded on there. So there's not near the flex that you have in the other style, and these are the new low clearance so that you're not beating on your shocks to death. We have these in standard, plus half, plus one. So they're all available. Price wise, I'd be guessing if I was to give you an idea. I don't know what the price is on it.
You're probably not enough.
Yeah, but I would definitely give Austin a call here at the shop tomorrow or Bobby, and they can give you the price on these. These things are slick. How you adjust them is, I think these adjustments are actually made by Weir's machine. And so it's a hind joint inside of an adjuster. So the adjuster is actually on out here. So, these still adjust very easily to change camber and caster and work very well. James, what's the advantage of the drop cup compared to the normal cup? Go ahead, Chad.
So the drop cup, when we lower the bearing down, with the bearing on the top, and then we're 2.5 inches down. So what that does is kind of like a teeter-totter. So when your point is lower, it rolls easier. When you're going up over the other point, it rolls harder. So just having that right front lower than the left front makes the car roll over on the right front easier. Same thing in the rear. We do have the picture here that they drew us. It's the rear, but it's the same atmosphere. So
yeah, it's the same concept. You got that right spring, whereas pivot in that right front or that right spring is lower than the pivot point in the left spring. So it's easier for that left spring to roll up and over that right spring. If that right spring was be harder, then the car would actually have to kind of try to pivot up and then it would go over, but it would be such a delayed reaction that the car is going to feel snappy on you instead of that smooth roll motion that you would normally get. Your old buddy Ryan Rotor wants to comment something about you, Randy, and I don't know why I can't understand why anybody would think such a thing, but he wants to know how much shine can Randy drink in one Q&A session?
Well, it depends on who else is on the board. I've been known to have a fair share. I've gone to knocking it down a little bit because straight moonshine will hurt you, especially as you get up in age. So I knock it down with some Dr. Pepper, some Sprite, and it's a nice little sipper then. But other than that, I put many of people on jack stands with my joy juice.
Yeah, I can imagine. All right, we got two more questions, and then our time is up for the day. Kim says, you guys do a great job. Thank you. And what is the part number on your new drop cup, Chad?
That's a 485D.
Okay. And that's on the website. They can order that right now.
You bet.
All right. Was the drop cup for the right rear, Chad?
Oh, why can't you make a drop cup for the right rear?
No, it says, was that a drop cup for the right rear?
This one? No. The rear, being able to run a shorter spring on the right rear than the left rear allows you to not have to run a drop cup.
Right.
So you can change the spring table. When the spring is separate in the rear, then you can change the spring height and lower the spring table the same way that the bearing being lower on the front drop cup does.
But what that is going to do for you, Jared, is it's going to give the car with that bearing inside that cup. And if you've ever watched a video, an in-car video of a 3-link car, how much movement that right rear spring gets. I mean, that thing bows and all kinds of movement with steer and everything. At least what's going to happen now is with that bearing in there in that cup, the top of that thing is going to stay in place a whole lot more. So your spring is going to actually do a lot better job without as much bind. Well, if the spring doesn't have as much bind, it's going to actually last a little bit longer, because when it's doing all that binding and moving around and stuff, that's what's actually causing these things to wear out. Not saying that you're going to get huge life out of the spring, but I would be willing to bet it's going to be considerable. On a sport mod right rear OD grab cup, are those going to bind less when the car rolls? Oh yeah, by far. Jacob, I just answered your question actually. Let's take, how many more questions do we actually have, Garrett?
5 or 6.
Okay. Let's see. What do you think of the right front brake caliper in front of the spindle instead of behind, Chad?
So the only reason that we put that in front, that was a Nick Hoffman deal, and he put the caliper on the front just for shock clearance. It's a common misconception that moving that caliper around on that rotor to the front, to the back, to the top changes the effect of the braking, and that is false. It does not.
Okay, Steve says he missed the boat on the bearing spring cup. Is there a bearing for the bottom mount in the frame or the rear axle to free it up from bind? The actual bearing goes between the cup and the spring itself, and that's what it will do. It'll help free it up. You wouldn't want to run one on the bottom. First of all, the dirt would kill you. Let's see. Would a drop cup on the right rear of a sport mod help the car? Well, you know, it's really the sport mod. The spring length is going to actually be more of a factor than the drop cup back there. I had not actually tried one back there, so I really couldn't tell you. It would have to. I mean, I'm quite sure it would help the car with the taller spring. What's the overall length of the WM311 SI tie rod kit?
Hold on.
All right,
Got to do a math class here too.
So while we're waiting for Chad, how do people go about getting a hold of you, Randy?
Well, you would go onto the website, thejoyofseating.com. That tells you everything we got in there. It tells you how to size yourself. The girls in the office do a great job on book face and that Insta whatever stuff, and I'm not much on that, but they do a good fair bit. I got a sales guy in Phoenix. Jason, he's up there getting ready for that Wild West shootout. He's a big part of that. This day and age, we're just we're on the end of your fingertip. That's for sure.
All right. Well, that sounds good. All right, Chad.
It's a standard 19-inch center to center, just like your normal Chevelle.
Awesome.
Don't you have a straight one? That one's bent.
Yeah, that's to get clearance when the car rolls over.
Yes. Yeah, when we were doing bump steer, we were kind of like, ooh, that's pretty close even still, after we did some of the bump steer. All right, Chad, we appreciate you. Thanks again. Once again, we will be back on here the 18th, 2 weeks from today. Our guest speaker is going to be David Ruderman. David builds one of the nicest race cars that I have seen out there. And of course, I know David does a great job with safety because, of course, he's been one of these guys that has been involved in some of the safety stuff. I know he's wrote some different things on Facebook about the Bristol race and things that people need to be kind of considering about going there. So that's going to be cool. And I just want to thank you, Randy. I really appreciate you coming on tonight. I think these people, like I said, the safety thing sometimes is not at the forefront, and it needs to be. And being able to hear from an expert, they'll believe it a little bit better. And then Randy's got his website there, like he said, thejoyofseating.com. So if you guys have any questions or whatever for Randy, get a hold of him. And of course, we know Bob and Chad, so you can always get a hold of us. All right.
That's great, guys. Thank you for having me.
We appreciate it. No problem. Thanks a lot.
No problem. Have a good year, guys.
You too.
Thank you.